Greetings, everyone. Your cartoonist pal Stan here with another episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon, the show that I'm doing to celebrate the fact that 2024 is the 50th anniversary of the game Dungeons and Dragons and the entire hobby of role-playing games. So, in case this is your first episode, each week I have a guest that I will have a conversation with, someone that has worked on Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of the people that I have worked with and are friends with because they're my friends. I want to have them on my show. And while we're having our conversation, I will be doing a cartoon homage to a classic D&D, a classic piece of D&D art, mostly covers from products. And I'm picking one from each of the 50 years as we go along. And this show, we're up to the year 1997, which my guest and I will be talking about some because that was a really important year for D&D. My guest tonight is... maybe I should have played that drum roll. I've got his drum roll sound effect I don't use because it's a cheesy, talk radio sound effect. But now it felt like it should go in there. My guest tonight is Thomas M. Reid, who was an editor and game designer and author and creative director for Dungeons and Dragons in Lake Geneva at TSR and in Renton at Wizards of the Coast. And he's been working in the game industry for quite a long time, even longer than me. And he's got a lot of fun stories. So, I'm not going to pause anymore. I'm going to bring him on so that we can have some fun chatting. Hello, Thomas.
Hey, Stan.
Thank you for coming on my show.
Well, thank you for having me. I've been kind of looking forward to this for a while. I knew that you'd been rounding up all the usual suspects, and I was thinking, I bet Stan reaches out at some point and says, "Would you like to be on my show?" And sure enough, you did. So I'm excited to be here. This is going to be fun tonight.
When I talk to some people, send me notes saying you should have so and so or you should have so and so, and I'm like, all right, there's only so far ahead I can plan. Not necessarily because I can't plan, but because it's, if I ask you, let's make a date in October or November, there's still a big chance that that's not going to work. So there's still a lot of really cool people that I haven't talked to yet who may have a similar feeling. You trust me, if you're watching this and you're like, why hasn't Stan called? You're on my list. But also, don't be afraid to reach out to me. Send me a note. Let me know you're interested. But and Thomas, you've been on my list from the beginning. If people go back and look at the playlist, I started with the people from the earliest days. I got very lucky and got Jim Ward about 3 weeks before he passed away. Yes. So after that, I've kind of been moving up the timeline unofficially, and we'll keep grabbing people in and out. Like next week, I'm supposed to have Harold Johnson on, who's from some of the early days, but then also from the later days with us. He was in for quite a while, and I'll be reaching out to some newer people. Anyway, now that I've blabbed even more. Thomas, I gave you a very perfunctory introduction. Why don't you tell the fine folks out there who Thomas Reid is?
Oh, boy. Okay, let's see. I won't go through the entire
just
of my life.
Like if it was Stephen Colbert trying to say who's going to be on a guest tomorrow night.
Yes. So I started working at TSR in October of 1991. I had answered an ad in Dragon Magazine because they were looking for editors. And I had to be cajoled by all of my friends to actually apply because I was convinced that 10,000 people would actually apply for a job to work at that company and that there was no way that I would ever get my foot in the door.
All right, but I'm going to stop you there for a second.
Yeah.
We're gonna rewind to a quicker, like, Thomas Reid is an author and blah blah blah, because we're gonna. It's not that I don't want to hear that. It's that I have a
But you
plan.
okay, that's fine. So I am a game designer, game editor, game creative director. As you said before, I live in Texas. I have been working in the industry for a third of a century, and I'm still just as busy as I ever was. Although I, don't move quite as fast as I used to. So, these days I can pull a hamstring just turning on the microphone. But
Yeah. No, wake up in the morning and find out that I pulled something.
that's right.
Karen Drader
Yeah.
says hi. Sue Wineline says hi, guys. Mike Selinker says, I love that Thomas is going with the full Elminster.
Yep. Actually, we have one of the people that works with me at. I'll jump into this right now. I work currently at Cobalt Press, which is owned and published by the esteemed Wolfgang Bauer, who is also one of our old Grognard companions from back in the day.
Who I also hope to have on the show sometime soonish.
Yes. Anyway, but we have a fellow who works there who has a nice thick beard that I was admiring last year at Gen Con, so just about 1 year ago. And I was like, I wonder if I can grow a beard like that. And this is the answer, which is yes, but it's yeah. So.
Well, I mean, it's certainly. I think it's a better look than the blue tape that I used from the photo I used on your promotional picture.
By the way, you're in hot water because Quentin said, "Hey, I got cut out of that picture. Damn it!"
Well, I didn't know. You gave me permission to be on the show.
Yeah, that's all right. He was just being Quentin, which is a sly devil anyway. So. But yes, he's old enough to drink now. That picture is a little outdated, but...
Well, I mean, the color of your beard in the two pictures tells that some time has passed.
Tells a lot of that story, yes. Yes. Oh, Lester's popped in. Hey, Lester.
Smith. Hello, Lester. All right, so now let's segue out of that into how did you get into D&D at all? So before you had that people urging you to apply, you were a D&D player, which is why they urged you to apply.
I was. So spring semester, almost summertime, I think 1980. I was riding home on the bus from school, and there was a kid who was a year older than me in the neighborhood, and he started telling me about this game that was tons of fun, and I didn't get it. Right? He kept saying, you go and you explore dungeons and you fight monsters and you do these things, and I'm like, okay, cool, but how do you move? And he goes, well, you just do it. Okay, but how? I mean, and he was having a hard time explaining it. And, clearly it was a lot easier to just show me. But he said, hey, we're going to be doing some stuff, soon. And if you want to get in on it, we'd love to have you. I mean, it was, of course, kid speak instead of nice, polite adult speak, but that's the gist of it. Right? So, I'm 12 or 13 years old, and I'm just like agog, right? Oh, this sounds really, really cool. And I ended up going home and started drawing like maps, dungeons on graph paper, but on civil engineering 10 squares to the inch graph paper.
Okay.
And I made my sister play with me, and we used 2 little hole punch dots for our tokens and rolled d6s to move around the dungeon. And and like in the 5th room, I said, the room flooded and you drowned, you dead. And that was it. So that was my initial expectation of D&D before I'd even actually gotten to play. But I was enamored of it even before I knew what it was, really. Oh, David Wise says, schmack! Hi, David! But anyway, so I started playing with these guys in my neighborhood, and we did a lot of the published modules that were out at the time. I think one of the first things that they ran us through was the Hidden Shrine of Timochin. and I started going to, I got all my D&D stuff at a craft store.
Mm.
I think it was called like Hobby King or something like that, and it was yarn and balsa wood model airplanes, and and there was like one little area off to one side that had one of those spinner racks that had all the gaming stuff. And oh boy, talking my mom into letting me buy both. Well, she bought it because I didn't really pay attention and bring my allowance with me or anything. But I convinced her to get me both the DM's guide and the Boot Hill box set in one go. Yeah. So, but that's how I got started. And
so, were you playing with the player's handbook? Is that what you started playing?
Yes. I didn't realize that there was basic D&D when I first got into the hobby. Everybody that introduced me to the game was using the AD&D books. And so, and I think that when I started playing, it was just about the time that the DM's guide was published. It couldn't have been more than a year after it came out.
Right.
So, but yeah, so we'd go over to this guy's house, and his parents were like both university professors. So they had a very different lifestyle and take on things. And they were like, as long as you're not killing each other, we had an entire section of the house all to ourselves, and we'd stay up all night and play. I, started trying to run my own games. I was terrible at it, as I'm sure we all were.
Like we all, yeah.
For my unbirthday, so my birthday is in December, but I always would do a party in June and have kids come over. And we did a thing one year where we set up our pop-up camper, and I had a bunch of kids over to spend the night and ran them through an adventure that I had written up. But I didn't get enough prepped, so I was trying to wing it. And yeah, it was miserable. But they complained later that they didn't, come over to spend all night riding 600 miles to an empty tomb. So, but I got better, and it was lots of fun, and we played lots of D&D. We played some Gamma World. We played Traveler. We played Boot Hill, like I had said. We played like the Steading of the Hill Giant Chief, and boy, there was a room in there where I think it's like either the chief's wife or his daughter or a cook or something is in this room asleep under the firs. And, our characters go in there, and the guy that's running the game describes it all. And he says, and this one is more shapely. And I said, shapely? What do you mean? And they all looked at me and were like, shapely. It's this giant is shapely. And I'm like, oh, okay. No, I still don't get it. And then they're like, shapely. And I was like, oh, okay, he's fat. And they're like, no. And I sat there for a minute, and I was like, oh, okay. He's like hunchback. He's deformed. And they're like, no, it's shapely. It's a woman. It's a female giant. I'd never heard that term before then. So, my education of adulthood was...
And today, Thomas becomes a man.
That's right.
You know what? It's funny. I think we've all got a word like that D&D. I mean, those of us who came in that era, right? Because they made no attempt not to throw in words. And sometimes it was introduced to a thing like shapely. I came into, weirdly enough, buxom is something that I did not know until I read about and in one of the in taverns had a sign out front of a buxom serving wench.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if nothing else, you learned a lot of different terms for a lady of the evening.
I know. Oh my goodness! All right, we're not going to focus on that.
We're not going to go down that road, but yes. Anyway, so that was my formative years, and I don't remember much about any characters. I don't remember much about any long campaigns. We just would do stuff and try things, and I remember the first time that the GM that I started playing with wanted us to do an outdoor adventure, and we were just like, "No, no, you can't take us from the dungeon. We love the dungeon." And he's like, "No, this is fun. I promise you." Yeah. And then in
change,
college, sorry,
change,
go ahead.
change is difficult. All right, before we
Yeah.
move to college, I'm going to switch views. I'm going to start doing my drawing for the evening.
Okay.
I'm going to do
Excellent.
an homage to a 1997 product called King of the Giantdowns. It was a Birthright adventure written by our good friend Ed Stark.
Yes.
So
Very good.
that's what I'm going to be drawing. And that should not
Okay.
distract you from any of the rest of the story. So we're going to college next.
Oh yeah. So I mean, when I got into college, at that point I had a group of friends that we pretty much did everything. And roomed with them. All went out to the movies together, did all this stuff, and we played D&D. We started the Temple of Elemental Evil campaign. I actually played in it. I wasn't running it, at least initially. But yeah, my really good friends. I will give a quick shout out to David and Jerry and Cheryl and Al and the other folks who kind of came and went in that group. When we played, and that was like the first time that we did a long-term campaign and actually, did a lot of things behind the scenes where we kept track of like all the stuff we brought out of the dungeon and then started selling it. We ended up making enough coin to buy a ship and started a little trade business while we were still exploring. That was the first campaign that stuck with me that I remember really, really well. Yeah, that was kind of my introduction to things. That's how I cut my eye teeth on D&D that way. So
So you played throughout college with this same group?
for most of it, yes. I actually, yes, that's just the easiest answer. We played throughout college. We A couple of us were living in one half of a duplex together, and we would plan Saturdays to get together for the entire day and play D&D. With periodic breaks to walk down to the corner store for snacks or to go outside and throw the frisbee or something just to stretch the legs and whatnot. But yeah, that's what we did. Probably 3 Saturdays out of 4 we would play, and then somebody would have like a test or something or a big paper that was due, and we would have to not do one weekend. But yeah, most of the time that was what we did on Saturdays.
And did you get to attending any conventions at that point? How is it that conventions came into your life?
So I will not go into a lot of detail because this will be much more fun when we get to the second part of our conversation. I had never been to a convention before I got to work at TSR.
Really?
Yes. And like I said, I've got actually a couple of very funny stories to share with you. But when we get to that part of the timeline, actually, a couple of friends of mine wanted to start a game convention. I grew up in Arlington, Texas, which is smack between Dallas and Fort Worth, and they wanted to set up ArlCon. And they worked pretty hard at it, but being middle school / high school kids didn't really have the resources to make it work effectively. And everybody that attended was all the people that we gamed with anyway. So it was really just a big weekend of gaming that was out on the university campus instead of in somebody's living room. But yeah, no, I really was underexposed to a lot of the different facets of the gaming community in those early days. So yeah, like I said, I didn't realize that there was a basic D&D. I should have, given the name and the title of the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but it just never even occurred to me. So,
what about the magazines? Were you buying magazines too?
yeah, I started subscribing to Dragon Magazine. I think my first issue was like number 48, and I
That's
kept that
pretty
up.
early.
Yeah, I kept that up all the way through until I went to work there. So yeah, in fact, I've still got all my old issues carefully packed away and sometimes pull them out. Um, we did a game one time. One of my buddies had come over to spend the night, and we did a game where we would decide on which, like, do a head-to-head competition with all these different covers and pick which ones we liked the best. And it was like a basketball tournament except for the artwork on the covers, and that was fun. So yeah, I learned a lot about some of the stuff that was going on other than just in the game system, but like, so I knew that there were conventions and but new products when those would come out.
Right.
Yeah. So.
All right. So you finished college, and when was it that we got to that? What you wanted to start your story with? Where were you?
So,
where were you in life? How far did you get in life before gaming dragged you into this life of iniquity?
So I went to I went to college. I started at the University of Houston. Then I spent some time at the University of Texas at Arlington, and then I changed my major from civil engineering to liberal arts. I got a degree in history with a minor in English creative writing, and I finished up at UT Austin, which is where I met Teresa, my lovely wife. And right after she graduated, because I finished a semester before she did, we got married, and then we got job offers from the parents of one of my friends who I'd been gaming with, and moved up to Indianapolis. Well, I mean, it sounds funny, but we were, we were young and we were poor, and she was still in school, and her parents, who lived here in in Austin as well, were so sweet and kind, and would always have us over for dinner for a nice home cooked meal, or oh, my car needs a new muffler or radiator or whatever, and we don't have the money, and they would help us out and all that stuff, and it was great. But at the same time, we were like, we need to get out on our own and really prove to ourselves that we're adults and can take care of our things. And so we got these jobs at Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis, or ooey pooey. and so we moved up to Indianapolis, and we were there for, I don't know, maybe like a year and a half.
Yeah.
And that's when I answered the ad in Dragon Magazine for an editor. TSR was looking for editors. And I was like, yeah, they're never going to even look at my resume. I don't have the right kind of experience. There's going to be 10,000 people, all that kind of stuff. But my friends, they're like, nope, you got to do this. You'd be great at this. You're such a good writer. You're such a good editor, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, I'll send it in. And then I didn't hear anything for quite a while. And they were like, have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? I was like, no, they're not going to, I sent it in. That's it. And they said, you need to call them and find out what's going on. See if they filled all you got to do is ask if they've filled the position. And I'm like, okay, fine. So I called up. I got patched through to, I can't remember her last name, but Paige. You remember Jim Ward's assistant? Was it Paige?
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah. And she got on the phone with me, and she's like, yeah, no, we're still doing interviews. And what's your name again? And I told her, and she's like, yeah, you're in here in a folder, still to be considered. And I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, but there's about 30 of you in here. And so Paige Rimmer. Yes. Thank you, David Wise. So then I was all excited, and I was like, wow, this might actually happen. And like 2 weeks later, I got a call from, I don't remember if it was Paige or Carol Hubbard, but one of them called and said that they wanted to bring me up for an interview. And so I was like, yeah, that's great. And of course I was all accommodating. I could come anytime they wanted. It was a 5-hour drive from Indianapolis up to Lake Geneva, and they put me up in the hotel and the whole thing. The interview clearly went well because I got hired. The one thing that I really remember was Jim Ward asking me if I had any weird phobias, and I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, are you afraid to get in an elevator with a really tall woman? I said, no, that's not really a problem.
That would be a really weird phobia.
It would be, but I did not have that one, fortunately. So, and
I'm just picturing Jim going, "Why is it only I have that?"
yes, exactly. And then, I got a call 2 or 3 weeks later, and they wanted to offer me the job, and I was so stoked. And they offered me at the time $21,000, which was amazing because I was getting paid about $16,000 at the university for the work I was doing.
Right. Well, I mean, that's, you know what, it's funny because the amounts we were paid were not that much, but they sound like so much less now. Like those numbers don't translate to modern numbers.
33, 34 years ago was, yeah, exactly. But so I was super happy, and my boss, the university professor who had hired me, was the mother of one of my really good friends. She says, "Oh, I wish that you would come and talk to me because I would have told you to ask for more." And I was like, "No, you don't understand. I just want to go work here. This is so cool." And so that's when I got hired, and I found out later. I actually heard a couple of funny stories. Tim Brown told me that he had gone into Mike Martin's office and asked Mike if he could hire somebody based on the fact that they played softball. Because I had put down that I played intramural softball as my other activities on my resume. And Mike Martin said, "No, but you can take it into consideration."
That can't be the reason, but it can be among them.
Yeah. And Steve Winter told me later that he'd somehow taken a copy of my resume home, and it sat on like the front table where they put the mail down for like several weeks. And then Mary grabbed it one night and said, "Do you need this thing, this swing set thing?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" Because one of the jobs that I had worked before I had moved to Indianapolis was building swing sets in the Texas heat in the summertime, and on there, and that's what she had seen. So yeah, that was how I got hired. And I heard that they had done some interviews with some other people who had more experience than I did and really wanted to hire them, but that they felt like they weren't going to be a good mix with the current staff, and that I actually was well-rounded and came into the mix with, some other skills. So, you never know what's gonna appeal or look good on the resume. So, if you play intramural softball, put it down because,
it's like when you're applying to college, having a good rounded outside of your academics,
Right. Exactly. So
you never know when you get hired because you volunteered at a pet shelter and the people there love animals.
Right. So never hurts. Anyway. So yeah, I came on board and I started editing my very first project. Oh boy.
That was going to be my next question.
Well, it was either my first or my second project. I don't remember which order these went in, but I think it was the first one. Was Knight's Sword, which was a Dragonlance adventure,
right?
That Colin McComb wrote. And thank you, Sue, for the kind words. I was not that great of an athlete. I just enjoyed playing. So, and I was left-handed, so I could be a good first baseman. Anyway, so Colin wrote this adventure, and it was like one of the first things that I was supposed to edit. And I, poured my heart and soul into doing this thing. It was a 32-page adventure, which is, in today's sort of experience is, oh yeah, I can knock that out in a couple of weekends kind of thing, right? But back then I was like, I've got a month to do this. I want to make sure I do it right, and I asked Colin a lot of questions, and I reorganized some things, and I put the character, right in the middle of the thing so that the players or the GM could take the middle pages out, open the staples up and pull those things out and pass out the characters and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And Colin tells me when I finish with it and it goes, it's ready to go to typesetting and all that stuff. He's like, "Oh man, you did such a good job on this thing. You added so much to the adventure. You should give yourself credit on that." you should add yourself as one of the designers because you really put a lot of stuff into that. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah. It's like, cool, thanks, man. So Knight's Tale shows up in the hallowed halls of TSR, the first print copies, and I haven't even seen it yet. And then all of a sudden I hear clomp, clomp, clomp up the stairs, the wooden stairs to the second floor, and Jim Ward goes, Thomas Reid! I said, why is your name on this adventure as a designer? Silly me. I didn't realize that Colin had only been there like 6 months and had no idea what he was talking about when he told me to do that. So, and of course, like a good, fresh-faced kid out of off the benches, I completely threw Colin under the bus and said, "Hey, I didn't know. Colin told me to.
I didn't know. It's not my fault.
Don't fire me! Don't fire me!" So,
the funny thing is that means that who was your creative directors? It didn't go from you to the print, right? Other people saw this.
Yes, that is true. But Jim, he wanted to make an example of me, so. I was in the Old Worlds group and the New Worlds group. So that was Steve Winter and Karen Conklin now, but she was Karen Boomgarden back in the day.
Yep.
And so
both of whom have been guests on this show.
yes, they have. And then my second project was the collectible cards, which David had worked on like the previous. I think David worked on the first batch, and then I got assigned to do the second one or the third one. I can't remember now. I think I did the third one. And, I learned all the things not to do from what they had discovered the hard way. Like, if you're going to do a series of something that's all tied together, you have to number them in such a way that they will fall on the same page in the 9-slot card holder pages in the 3-ring binder, which got done the first times through. So that was, that was quite the adventure. And then, man, we could sit here for 2 hours, and I could probably. Well,
let's not go through every product you've done.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is that the two that stand out because they were like very, very first. And so, like I said, I came on board in October of 1991. I started the same day as Wolfgang.
Yeah.
I think John Ratliff and I think it was Rich Baker had started a week before, or maybe Rich and Wolfgang and I started the same, and Ratliff was a week before. But anyway, there were 4 of us that got hired on. And at some point in there, we started talking about Gen Con. And you were asking me about my previous con experience.
Right.
So we're starting to plan out what we're going to do. We're sitting in one of the product group meetings. Karen is running the meeting. And, of course, Jeff Grubb and Zeb Cook are in the meeting. And Zeb is working on The Creature That Ate Sheboygan. He's doing design work while we're doing the meeting. And they start talking about what we're going to do at Gen Con. And somehow it comes up that I have not been to a Gen Con. And Zeb just starts cackling. And he's like, "Oh, you young whippersnapper, you are in for something, quite the treat." And so I got the whole scare story of Gen Con is unlike anything you've ever seen, and it was, but it was also unlike anything any of us had ever seen, because that was the first year that they put the castle up, the giant castle, the TSR booth.
Well, and, so we've had a bunch of discussions about that, and everyone's been like, when did the castle go up? Was it here or there? Well, you can say for sure it was the year you started.
It was the summer of 92, because I started in the fall of 91, and then we wrapped around, and I am almost certain that was the first year the castle was up, and that was my first Gen Con.
So, like I say, we have talked about this before, but for people who may be watching this who didn't see those previous episodes, right. What do you mean, the castle?
So our facilities manager, Pete Renner, was commissioned a group to build us the booth to end all booths, and it was this humongous footprint, and it was all made out of like plywood and 2x4s and 4x4s, and nice like foam core boards on the outside and texturing and everything, and it looked like a big castle. And the front of the castle was like this big drawbridge kind of thing, and it had these 8 towers around the perimeter of it, and it had a big sales booth in the back along the back wall, and each one of the towers we set up to run a different demo for different product lines that TSR was doing. So we had the Forgotten Realms demo table, and we had the Al-Qadim demo table, and the Dragonlance demo table, and the core D&D, and everybody was showing up at the castle and standing around playing in these 10 to 15 minute demos for us to sort of feature the products that we were doing. And a lot of times it was, this is a thing that's going to be published soon, or that we have for sale right now back there in the sales booth. But it was huge. It took up probably, I don't know, an area the size of a large house inside the convention center.
Yeah. So at the convention center, there's a big area that was for all the exhibitors, and in the center of it, the biggest single square footage was this castle that rose up. Was like 2.5 stories tall.
Yes, exactly. So that was that, and I think this was the first year. It might have been the second year, but it was definitely one of the first couple of years that everybody else that was at the show, all the other exhibitors, the dealers, and everything, plotted to attack us Sunday morning before the hall opened with Nerf weapons, and Lorraine sent Pete Renner out to go buy as many, I think some other people might have helped, but go buy as many Nerf weapons as we could possibly get our hands on. So they cleaned out like the Target and the Kmart and the whatever. And that morning we, had this big all-out melee. They put Lorraine in a Thor helmet and a big red cape and lifted her up above the battle on a cherry picker, and she commanded the troops from the battlements, and we had this wonderful fight.
It was. I was not there for the first year, but those Nerf wars, those Sunday morning Nerf wars, were something to behold. The entire industry lays siege to the TSR castle, and Nerf weapons fly around.
Yes. So I spent the first couple of years just doing editing, and eventually it wasn't too long after that, I got named as an assistant product group leader under Steve, and he started teaching me some of the elements of managing the lines and stuff, and then I had to start going to the meetings in Execland to talk about schedules and, kind of helping to keep track of where things were and who's proofreading what and all that kind of stuff. And, eventually got named as a product group leader in my own right.
So did you start as like his assistant group leader? Is that what that was?
Yeah. Steve Winter was the product group leader for the Old Worlds group, and I got named the assistant product group leader. And so I basically was his helper, but I learned a lot from that. I think at some point, I guess it was when Jim got elevated to vice president, and then David stepped into Jim's role. So we had a couple of new creative directors or product group. We called them product group leaders early on, and then we called them creative directors or something else later on like that. But so that was like within a couple of years I was doing that. And
so I can tell you for sure that that's the year I got hired because yes. I got interviewed and hired within the first few months that David was in that position.
Yeah, we did. We brought several new people on board. You and Ed and Monty and there were a couple other people I'm sure I'm forgetting, not intentionally,
Yeah,
obviously.
no, there's a lot. We in fact a couple of shows ago had a big conversation about that 1995 was the last big hiring wave at
Mm-hmm.
TSR before Wizards of the Coast, and
Yeah.
it's incredible kind of the names that came out of it. It was the new wave. After
Yeah.
the Grubbs and the Reids and the Winters and uh, that was Bruce Cordell was the tail end of that. The last in that line was
Yeah.
Bruce, but
Right.
I was before Bruce and Keith Strom and Cindy Rice and Miranda Horner, Ed Stark, Carrie Bebris, Jeff Quick.
Yeah.
All of that was within that year.
And we were busting at the seams too. We were packing people into every possible nook and cranny of the building, trying to find places to put more. Um, uh, I want to say not booths. What was the our offices? The cubicles.
Cubes is
Yeah.
what you mean?
Yeah. Well, that was an interesting story in and of itself. I was in that very last cube on the corner when I first started, where you came up the stairs. My cube was right there at the end of the row, on the end of the column.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you probably didn't know about this. I don't know if you ever heard this story, but they had my cube wall, one of my walls was actually a clear plexiglass piece. And everybody called it the fishbowl, because people coming up the stairs and walking along that balcony could look in and see me. And I didn't care, but everybody else was like, how's it feel being in the fishbowl? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Well, apparently when they decided to add some more cubes onto that balcony, they made another row of them. They also decided to rearrange the doorways, I should say, for the cubes that were along that path. And I came back from a weekend and found every last bit of my stuff in a pile on the floor of my cube, because the workmen had come in and thrown all my reference material and pulled down all of my posters and all of my artwork and just threw it in a pile in the middle of my cube floor so they could redo the walls and remove the fishbowl piece and everything else. And I went down to Pete Renner. I was like, what happened? And he was like, oh, I'm really sorry. I was like, I would have been happy to move that if I'd just known. And he was like, no, they weren't supposed to do that. Anyway.
Yeah, you know what? I knew that cube was called, because I was like 2 cubes away from that when I finally.
Yes.
I was 2 or 3 weeks with no cube, just kind of being sent from place to place.
You were bursting at the seams, right?
Yeah, but it was still called the fish cube, though there were no longer any lucite walls.
Correct. Yes, it was. Yeah. So there was that. And somebody's been asking some questions. So let's take a look here.
What's going
cards.
on? Oh, Ravenlord. Hey, Ravenlord, thank you for popping in. And Jay. Spellfire
Spellfire was a different animal. That was in response to the collectible card game frenzy. But we had originally done collectible cards like baseball cards. They didn't actually have a game on them. They just had lots of cool pieces of TSR art and like stat blocks on the back for things.
Yeah, this was before the existence of trading card games. These were just trading cards.
Right. Well, we knew when trading card games were a thing the year that we went to Gen Con and they opened the hall up on that Thursday. And everybody who was anybody playing those cards made a beeline to the Wizards of the Coast booth, which was at the very back of the hall. And they stampeded through the TSR castle to get there. So
this might be a thing.
Yeah, it could be. Well, and we're talking about 1997, so so like for 6 years I worked there in Wisconsin, and the first 4.5 to 5 of them were amazing, the best of times kind of stuff. Lots of new friends, lots of fun projects. Got more experience doing the middle management thing, and I really loved it. And then, of course, we found out that things weren't going so well on the financial side. And, you know, somewhere around Christmas of '96.
It was yes, it was the week before Christmas.
Yeah.
It was
I think I was home because I think one of my kiddos was sick. It might have been Galen. And the I got a call from David who said, "You probably better get up here. Something's happening." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I actually drove up to the offices, even though I had taken the day off. And yeah, we had walked a bunch of people out of the building, which was neither um, unique nor, in retrospect, at all surprising. But it was still a big shock and dark day for everybody.
yeah,
Um,
we talked to quite a bit about that. Um,
but
go ahead.
yeah, I don't need to dwell on that part of it, other than just to say
No, I
we're
mean
talking
everyone that was
1990.
there. It's an important part of our story.
It is, and 1997 was the year that all of that really fell out. Right? It was
But
like you said, a week before Christmas
90,
of
yeah,
'96.
'97 was a year that, well, we spent the first quarter of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Those of us who were left working on products when we weren't publishing anything.
Correct. They just said, keep doing what you're doing, keep making the stuff. Eventually, we'll get this stuff out on the shelves. So we can't stop now, and we did. We just sat there and put our heads down and worked hard. And oh my God, the water cooler talk and the lunchtime
Yeah.
talk and after hours talk at different people's houses of the speculation about what was going on. And but yeah, we just did that. We just sat there and made products for 6 months, and then there started to be rumors that Lorraine was looking to be able to sell the company, and I don't remember all the different companies that were looking to buy us. We heard everything.
Right. The big rumor I remember uh, was that um, the Random House, who we owed so much money to, was just going to
Was just
buy it, and
just
that
acquire us for the money that they were owed. Yeah, I remember that. That was one that went on for a while. Um,
but then
and
Ryan Dancy and Peter Axon came along.
Yep. And I won't go into a whole lot of that just because, I'm sure that other people have heard a lot of that story. But it was interesting in the aftermath of all of that. We had our first all hands meeting, as Peter referred to them. And we started talking about what things were going to look like moving forward, and Peter said, we don't want to change anything. You guys know what you're doing. We just want to, infuse you with fresh energy and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things I remember was that all that was happening like in May or June, something like that, I think.
Something like that, because
Yeah.
it got done before Gen Con. When Gen Con happened, it was finished.
Yes. Well, and Peter was like ready to get us all out to Seattle, right? He
Right.
was champing at the bit to get everybody moved, and he was like, "We're going to start doing this in 3 weeks, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that." And I raised my hand and I said, "Peter, you do that, and then 2 weeks later, you're flying every single one of us back for Gen Con." I said, "Are you sure you want to not wait until after the show is over to start having everybody relocate?" And I could see his face fall, but his gears turning, and he was like, "Yeah, damn it. All right, we'll wait." So, because that was quite the adventure in and of itself, of everybody suddenly going, "Oh, we have to put 30 houses on the market in these
Yeah.
tiny little towns where 5,000 people live at a pop, and we have to find movers." And they paid for just about everything. It was so different from what I was used to doing, which was renting a U-Haul and loading it up myself. But but yeah, that was '97. We got bought, we recovered, we went to Gen Con, and then everybody migrated west that was going. There were some folks that chose not to go, and certainly understood the the reasons for it, but we all. Is that an upside down person you're making there,
It is.
Stan?
Look at there. It's a little
Oh
face.
yeah, it is. All
I
right,
tell
I
you,
need you to.
I find out things while I'm doing these drawings. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
okay, I'll put that in.
that's cool. You need to future that up a bit and make it more yellow, though.
Hey, you know what? Bill Slavisek told me I should make sure you tell me the story of the dinner he, and Lorraine had.
Dinner. Oh man.
And then he said, "No, don't make him tell that. He won't want to tell that." But now I want to know.
Well, it wasn't just a dinner. She had like a party at her place in Chicago, and a bunch of us were invited, and Bill Slavic and I went together. Yeah, that was crazy. That was so weird. She did one of the, the French 3 kisses on alternating cheeks thing when she told us goodbye. So,
Oh, wow!
yeah, it was.
So
bizarre,
was this after the sale? This was her goodbye to you all?
No, I don't remember why this happened. I want to say that it was close to Christmas time, and she just invited some of the like creative directors or something to come, and I don't know. I don't know if there were ulterior motives or she was just being nice to certain members of the staff. But it wasn't horrible. It just was. I hate saying that. It was not like it was an unfun time. It was just weird and awkward for people who were not used to rubbing elbows with the rich of Chicago. That's what I was really trying to say. And there was a part of me that was very flattered to have been invited, but it was also just like, man, why are you inviting me? I'm a nobody. So, but yeah, that was different. And Bill and I think, rode together, so we had plenty of time to kind of talk about it going and then more coming back.
Wait, all right. So one of the things that I didn't get in the first part of you telling me that I'm picking up on now is it was the she of Chicago were there. It wasn't just company people.
There were a lot of people there we did not know.
Yeah,
and I mean, I think a lot of the executives from the company were there, but there were other people there as well. Yeah. So, and it wasn't like a true dinner party. I guess I think I blocked out a lot of this.
Bill is trying to make you remember.
Yeah, hors d'oeuvres and drinks and people standing around in different parts of her house having conversations and stuff. So, I mean,
all right,
yeah.
All right. Well, there, mission accomplished. I've asked you about it.
Yes, it was a perfectly fine party. It was just so different from what we were used to doing and going. So, yeah.
All right. So I remember during the phase where the buyout had happened, and a lot of some of us, it was just a super easy decision to go out to Seattle, right?
Sure.
And other people, I mean, some people didn't get invited, and some people clearly weren't going to go. And then there were people that kind of struggled with the question. And as I remember, you were one of the people that struggled with it.
Yes, I was. I mean, age and maturity mellows lots of things. But at the time that this all happened, I was really unhappy that Wizards of the Coast was the company that acquired us. Yeah. And that was frankly because I was resentful of what the product they were putting on the table, and this game that they had developed that was going gangbusters. I had absolutely no interest in Magic the Gathering. I actually didn't want to play it. I've still never played the game to this day, although if somebody said, "Oh, come on, sit down and play it," I certainly would now. But at the time, I was like, no, I'm not interested. And I wasn't really at all confident that I wanted to go out there and do that, to go in there and work. I told some people, and like I said, I've mellowed. This is not how I still feel, but I told some people at the time that it was like the barbarians at the gate to me, right? It was just, I just, and in retrospect, there was a lot of other reasons why TSR wound up in such financial straits at the time, other than just the fact that Magic had become this big thing.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't really want to go. And Teresa, I don't know, she had a job still there, and I thought, I could stay and maybe do other work, freelance work, something like that. And it didn't help when we all got our first offers from the company, and we had been hearing these outrageous sums of money being bandied about for everybody who had gone to work there, which, I guess in the earliest days were maybe true, but how things grow in the telling. So we were all expecting these gigantic salaries to be dangled in front of us to convince us to go out there. And it wasn't. It was reasonable, but it was also a little on the low side, given the change in the cost of living between Podunk, Wisconsin and the Seattle West Coast area.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that didn't help. And I really did consider not going. And Bill Slavisek, actually, he and Michelle brought pizza and came over one night and said, I need you to come. I need you to be there. Because he was the one that was going to be taking up I don't know if that had been announced yet or if we even knew it yet, but he was like, we need some stability, we need some continuity, you need to come. And he I wouldn't say that he's the one who talked me into it, but he certainly contributed a lot to my making the decision to go ahead and go out there.
Right. Well, I mean, clearly what he did, we were all made job offers. I remember I don't remember who Wizards sent HR people to talk to us. And there were two in particular, and I'm not going to say them by names because there's no need to. But one of them, people who met with that person, had a much brighter feeling about what was going on and a much more feeling like the company wanted us. The people that met with the other person came out feeling like we were begrudgingly given these jobs, despite the fact that our company had failed, but for some reason Peter wants to bring you out.
Right. Yes. And I remember that, but I had forgotten that, but I do remember that now. Yeah.
I remember, you and I were pretty close for a while, and at that time, I do remember that you met with that other person. And that was I couldn't believe what a huge difference that was.
Yeah.
And nothing got done. It just kind of fell out. You got lucky or you didn't. And who was who was your onboarder?
I don't remember any of that, Stan. That phase of everything is really fuzzy. I know we got out there. We were so they took good care of us, right?
Yeah.
We put our house on the market, and we moved, and we rented a house, and they were actually paying the mortgages on the houses back in Wisconsin for us, which was we couldn't have moved otherwise. And that was all great, but because we had just saturated the market with houses, and as I found out later, I had bought my house during sort of an uptick. I wasn't getting any offers for anywhere near what I was trying to get for the house just to break even. And I finally ended up going into Peter and said, "Hey, I've gotten an offer. This is as close as it's gotten to where I wanted." And I said, "I just want to recoup what I paid for it a year and a half ago or whatever it was. Would you cover the other $5,000? And he was like, "Yeah, we'll do that." So, I mean, they took good care of us. They absolutely did. But I just remember the whole process of going through all of that, and and some people deciding not to go, and some people deciding to go, and who didn't get asked, and all that stuff was it was a difficult time. So all
right, so we're. I want to talk a little bit about our time in Renton before we move on. Again, as we talked about at the beginning, we're at an hour already.
Yeah, I know, and that's how this always goes. But I'm fine to keep talking.
I
I'm
don't.
not going anywhere. So
Yeah, but I'm trying to keep these things to about an hour, hour and a half. So we're on like the
fine.
30-minute timeline here, and then I'll have you back again. We can talk some more.
Sure, that sounds fine.
All right.
Um,
So we
I'm in
get out
Renton.
to Renton.
Yep. And Bill Slavisek winds up getting the director of the department job. And we get all sorts of great help. And I cannot remember the guy's name, but he was tall and athletic, bald, and he did all of our number crunching for us. And
Todd?
Todd, yes, I remember his
Bazakis.
Bazakis. Yes, your memory is solid there. Yeah, Todd Bazakis would
Takes
sit down.
kidneys.
Yes, and we went through a lot of all right, what do we need to do to get back in the black? Oh, well, clearly we've got way too many product lines, way too many products every. I mean, oh, this is a kind of a throwback. I don't know if anybody remembered this or brought this up in any of your interviews yet, but Jim Ward had his Oreo theory of game design, which was anything you can do 7 different ways, and people will still buy them and eat them. So you had Oreos and double stuff Oreos and chocolate
Right.
Oreos and mint Oreos, and so we kind of applied a lot of that to the product lineups every year, and which is why we wound up with like 130 products in a given year. And of course that included all the evergreen stuff plus the adventures, but also plus all the novels and anything else that we were doing, the special project du jour. So when we got out there, we trimmed a lot of the fat and got it down to much more manageable lines. I was made the creative director for the core D&D line. The talk started almost immediately about doing a 3rd edition. I remember, again, hindsight, mellowing, all that kind of stuff. When Peter first came out and talked to us, he sat there and said, we're not going to change anything. We're not going to change, we're still going to call everything TSR because that's the logo everybody knows. And, it wasn't that long after we got out there that some of that started to change, that, he wanted to get rid of the TSR logo and just publish it all under Wizards of the Coast. We started talking about 3rd edition, and he wanted to be really hands-on with the design of 3rd edition, which was his prerogative, right? Talking about Peter Atkinson, it was his prerogative to do
Right.
that. He bought the company; he better be able to do what he wants with it. But it was just leaving a bad taste in my mouth because I'd heard one set of promises and they weren't really holding. So I got over it. But at the time, I was like, I'm not sure that this is what I want to be doing. And I ended up switching over and becoming the editor for special projects with Jeff Grubb. And we were the team that was supposed to just noodle on things, right? And come up with interesting ideas for stuff that weren't like on the schedule, but that we thought ought to be a serious consideration. Or when something came along where they needed us to put together a packet, they're going to do the Centipede game because now we're owned by Hasbro and we're going to do the Centipede game for D&D. So think about what would be involved in that. Or we're thinking about relaunching this line. What would be the best product lineup for this new line or whatever. And so Jeff and I sat in a double cube, side by side in the same little area, and worked on that kind of stuff. That was another 4 years, and I was involved with. We acquired, what was it? Last Unicorn.
Last Unicorn Games. Yes.
And we got the Call of Cthulhu license with that, and we also did the Wheel of Time books from, I think that they had gotten the license to do that, or maybe not. Maybe we had gotten that, but we were doing all that stuff. I was responsible for wrangling those two lines. Oh, and I almost completely forgot. I shouldn't have, but we got the license to do Star Wars. And
So, do you, do you want me to apply some of my memory to that, or do you just want to go?
well, I was just going to say that a bunch of us wound up going out to Skywalker Ranch and getting to watch Episode 2 while it was still in post editing, which was quite the adventure. And it isn't really about 50 years of D&D, so I wasn't going to dwell on it. But we did do that, so it was kind of interesting. So if you've got something interesting to add to that, I'm all ears.
Well, I was just going to say that when we picked up Last Unicorn, they had Dune and Wheel of Time, I think, were the things that they brought over, and Star Trek. But their Star Trek license was canceled, was negated by the hope was we were in the process of negotiating with Star Wars. Either that had closed and hadn't been announced, or we were in the process of that just as Wizards. And the hope had been that we could bring in Star Trek and Star Wars and do them both. But it because of the buyout, the Star Trek license stopped and needed to be renegotiated, and someone got into Paramount's office and whispered in their ear, "You don't want to be in the same place with Star Wars," is what we heard. But for whatever reason, Paramount said, "Yeah, we're not going to go with you."
Right. Yeah, I don't remember much about that, but I do remember that when we acquired, was it them or was it another company that we also picked up that was a small company? But Ken Hite had been assigned to write the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, and that he, when they were still their own company, had set that aside for a while so that they could work on something else that was behind, so they could get it out the door. And then we acquired it, and he lost the opportunity to work on it because we brought it in house and had Monty do it as a D20 product.
Yeah, that was
not making me very happy. But I remember that there was a lot of stuff that was going on then. There was a lot of acquisitions of things. They were all game related, so that was that made sense. But so yeah, so I spent 4 years there and managed some teams, did some stuff. But eventually got to the point where I wasn't really, the West Coast was great, but just wasn't, I was just ready to not do that anymore. I think one of the big problems was that, we had gotten bought out by Hasbro, and Hasbro always liked to do a little trimming right around the holidays. And I got really tired of laying people off right before Christmas, and finally said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and tender my resignation. We want to get the kids back home to Texas where they can be closer to their grandparents anyway. So in 2001, I resigned and we moved back down here, where I have been for longer than I've ever lived anywhere by a really, really good stretch.
All right. I'm gonna stop my drawing for now. This is what we got. This is what I got done in about an hour.
Yes.
Not bad.
I said I've been studiously observing it while we've been talking. And it's...
Right. So those watching, as usual, I will finish this off screen. If you are a subscriber to our free newsletter at 50yearsinthe.dungeon.substack.com, you'll get to see it first. And if you're not a subscriber, I post it a few weeks later publicly. So yeah. But
we get a chance to talk about what I think of the 50 years, but we can do that another time.
No, that's what I'm segueing to.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
So yeah, here's my secret plan, Thomas. Is I start with just us on the screen. Then I switch over. We have a lot of conversation, and then as we're nearing the last 10, 15 minutes or so, I bring it back to just us on the screen, and we talk for the tail end of it. I got a plan.
You do, and you clued me into some of that, but I misread the tea leaves there. I thought we were wrapping up. So
Right. No,
that's
no,
great.
that's good. It's good.
I'm having fun talking.
I
So
notice here in the chat that Jay says he's enjoying the show and he's missing he or she missing D&D tonight because I'm interviewing their DM.
yes, that's Jay. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was the Jay. Yes, so I have to give a big shout out to my friends Jay and Adrian and my son Quentin and sometimes Jerry. You know Jerry, who are my Wednesday night D&D group, and we are taking a hiatus tonight so that I can do this cool talk with you. Yeah, that's
Well,
my
that,
gaming group. We're currently playing the 5e Midnight campaign setting.
right. All right. Well,
For
then
anybody
I say thank you to your group too for
yeah,
letting
yeah.
you.
For anybody that doesn't know, the Midnight is kind of like what would the Lord of the Rings world look like if Sauron had won, but with all the serial numbers filed off. So yeah, we put a hiatus on it for tonight, so I could come and talk. And
Yeah.
hi Jay, hi Adrian.
All right. So as you said, this is the part we're now going to just kind of segue into the we're about. This is the 50th anniversary. Was the impetus for me to start this show.
Right.
And between the two of us, we have been gaming for 47 to 48 of we've been gaming for about 98 of the 50 years.
Yes, that's right. That sounds right.
So
okay.
what D&D and role playing in general. I mean, that's the other thing that kind of gets lost sometime in this discussion is I'm all for. I mean, this is about celebrating D&D. It's in the title, but the fact of the matter is that this is also the 50th anniversary of role playing in general.
Right.
And the whole hobby has gone from not existing when you and I were 10 years old to being huge. I mean, huge now, like it's never been before.
Right.
Taking this time to think about it like we probably wouldn't in any ordinary year, what does that look like to you looking back over the last 50 years?
It's a very resilient hobby. And it has had a lot of ups and downs, and it has had a lot of comings and goings, but the hobby as a whole is still a huge, huge passion project for the people who participate in it. And, the style of gaming has changed over the years.
Quite a bit.
There's, the technology that allows us to play remotely. All of that kind of stuff. But it's still at the core a thing that people who want to get together and use their imaginations do, unlike just about anything else that's out there, right? You can watch the same movies, you can go to the theater together. You can read the same books, you can watch the same TV shows and talk about them and discuss what might happen next or speculate, on all sorts of different stuff. Or you can play a lot of board games, you can play war games, and those all have a lot of common elements, but I don't think there's anything that is quite like the free-form imagination activity that is this hobby.
Right.
And people continue to want to do it in 100 or 100,000 different ways. And I think that's remarkable in and of itself.
Yes, someone who's watching but didn't want to say this in the text says that your beard resembles a bit on the giant I was drawing, the giant ghost.
Well, I guess like all those years ago when I posed for Spellfire cards, I'm still serving as a model for the art.
There we go.
The
your big beard there.
Let me kind of. Oh, I got to go the other way. There we go. No, this way. There. Now I kind of. Oh, man.
I'm looking at the
But yeah,
person. Hey, I didn't say who you are. You you calm down there, or I'll fully out you.
oh man. But I mean, when I started this game, like I said, a couple of friends told me, or one friend told me about it, and then a few more got me involved in my first game. And in between, I tried to play a silly board game with my sister,
Right,
but that was the only way that and the game was sold in a craft store.
right.
Right now, it is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. It's they're making movies about it, and we're publishing things digitally, and we've got virtual tabletop platforms to play remotely, so people can live in different time zones and still get together. I actually have my Sunday night group. One of my players is currently on a 55-foot catamaran sailing around Scotland at the moment. And we moved our gaming sessions up several hours here in the States so that on Sunday nights for him, he could still log in because they got some kind of a satellite uplink internet access this year. So he could log in and still play with us, even though he's on a boat right now. So I mean that right there is a great illustration of just how different the hobby is, but yet that fundamental element of it, which
I
is unlike anything else that you can do, is still there. It's still a big part of
Yeah, no,
what we do.
I totally agree with what you were saying about it's the we can find lots of different games that we can play together, but there's something about creating the saga, creating. I
Right.
mean, which is very primal,
Yep.
it's right, and uh, but still, that's what makes this game. That's what makes people love this game with the
Right.
passion that exceeds uh, the many of it. And there are people who love. I don't want board gamers and minis gamers to start coming after me. There are people who love those games that much too. But
Right.
this,
No, I mean people love football and people
right, right,
love other football, right? And and they're just as passionate about the things that they do as
yeah.
we are about this, and that's totally great. I'm not saying that like, oh, we're
No,
special and unique.
I didn't think you were, but I'm the one that's going to get comments.
No respect, no respect. But the activity itself is pretty
Yes,
unique.
yes.
That's what we're saying.
And
Yes,
I think you captured that the idea, just the primal nature that it appeals to us in that way. And
yes,
people may like board games, but they don't remember them. They don't remember individual board games the way they remember individual stories they told together.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think back on the earliest days, and even before I started playing, I can mentally grasp how this started off with war gamers, right? And the first inklings of D&D were really just, hey, let's take some of our commander figures and give
right.
them names and extra stats, and then let's go do something with them. And
Yeah,
somebody had the bright idea to let's go raid the village, right, and get more treasure because we need to pay our soldiers. Oh well, let's go into the castle and steal all the gold. Well, let's go underneath the castle, and oh, there's weird monsters down here. And and it was like, bring 5 characters because 3 of them are gonna die.
right. And yeah, once they went from being just I'm sorry, it's a Godzilla mini, but when it goes from being a mini that you've got to being
Right,
Bob, who is the same Bob next week.
right.
Now there's a
Exactly.
story.
Now there's a story, and it's you said primal, and I think that's a really good term for it. It's not different in the human psyche from the earliest storytellers weaving the fables and the mythology to explain the world around them to try to help it make sense. That need to imagine how things might be somewhere else or might be behind some veil that we can't see is no different, right, than what we do now, where we imagine, where we're telling mythology, we're telling fables, we're just it's slightly different scale. It's it's not the gods necessarily,
Right.
although some people campaigns it's the gods, but it's personalities that we've created and are explaining why they're doing the things that they do. So instead of describing why thunder and lightning happen and scare the crap out of earliest man, it's why is my character desperately in need of finding this legendary individual and the sword that they once wielded.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing. So yeah.
All right. So Thomas, you were saying earlier that you're working now at Cobalt,
Yeah.
and you guys
Yes.
have a product that just launched today.
That is correct. Cobalt Press has been working very hard on producing a D&D variant. That's our own rule system that's very much based on the rules of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, called Tales of the Valiant. And we've been making a big deal out of it for several months now, and we've been, doing all sorts of sneak previews, free RPG day, and all sorts of stuff. Today, this very day, the serendipity of it all, is actually the street date for Tales of the Valiant. And so if anybody is interested, wants to check it out, we've been getting, lots of great reviews. I don't want to toot our own horn too much, and I'm going to be biased, but all honesty, we've been getting some really great reviews from a lot of people out there that this is a lot of fun D&D kind of turned up to 11, and a lot of improvements made to it, and it's out there now at your favorite local gaming store. So if you have a hankering to check it out, you can walk down or drive down or bicycle down to your favorite gaming store and take a gander, because it should be on their shelves now. And that's really exciting for us, because it's been 18 months or so of work to get this out the door, from 2 Gen Cons ago through the fall of talking about, the things that were happening that were unsettling to a whole lot of gaming companies, to the decision to do this, and then to start the design work and to get playtesting done, and to all the things that one goes through to publish a product. 18 months later, we actually finally get to brag about this thing fully and completely. So it's kind of been an exciting day for me all the way around. First, I got to talk about D&D with my good buddy Stan, and then I got to tell folks about Tales of the Valiant. So.
Yes. So if you can go to your store, or on the screen now, we've got talesofthevaliant.com. You can go check it out there too.
So, but whatever you play, keep playing. Enjoy this hobby. Sink your teeth into it. It's an amazing thing, and however you do it, whatever rules you like, whatever particular adventures you crave, do it. Keep the hobby alive and thriving, because it's unlike anything else anybody does in this world, and I think that's really special. So.
And that's a good place for me to say, Thomas, thank you for showing up. If you hold on, I'm going to take you off screen, but you and I can chat again in a minute.
Sounds like
thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. I had a good time. Thanks, everybody.
All right, so there was my conversation with Thomas Reid. As I've said to many of the folks who've been on, I hope I can get him back again, because there were so many things we didn't talk about that we could have, that I think would have been just as entertaining. I know, but just as entertaining to me, and you guys will come along for the ride. So again, if you are a fan of the show, and I hope you are, I hope that you will consider signing up for our free newsletter at 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com. You'll get to see the art that I do as soon as it's finished, a week or more ahead of when I show it to the rest of the world. You'll get all the behind-the-scenes information about what's coming up on the show. I was hoping today that I would have something to show you all, because I've been talking from the day this started about art prints, which people who are subscribed to this newsletter are going to, one subscriber each month is going to get a free art print. And I've been saying that, and it hasn't been happening because I've been having trouble getting the prints done. The prints are in the shipping. They were supposed to be here this afternoon, and they didn't get delivered. So hopefully next week I will have the first 20 or so prints that I can show you, and then I can catch up, make for past months, do some random drawing somehow to make sure that I hand some of those out and share them with the folks. People who are subscribed there will also have the option to buy them. I'm not going to put them up for sale publicly. It's only for people who watch this show. So there's another really good reason to get a free newsletter. Notice how I'm stressing the free? It's free. So yes, please check that out. 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com. Also, if you just want to watch what I'm doing art-wise with this and everything else I'm doing, I do an improv cartooning show on Thursday nights. You can check out my Instagram page at instagram.com/Stanex. And if you want to kind of become a behind-the-scenes patron of the Stan, you can go to my Patreon, patreon.com/Stanex. But I'm really pressing the free thing. Like free, 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com. All right, enough of that. Thank you all for joining me. I will be back next week. On the schedule is Harold Johnson. I know that he's got some... he's doing a stage performance this weekend and a lot of other things that may need us have to shift that around, but he and I have been talking for a while, and this seems like it's the week it's going to happen. So check next week. Harold should be here, and keep coming back. We're going to keep interviewing interesting folks, having fun conversations, and doing drawings of classic D&D art. So until next week, thank you very much, and I will see you soon.